Iru literally means darkness, and the Irulas are said to have got their name because they lived in deep, dark forests. Lakshmi Amma was an Irula, and she knew all about the forests on this hill, where her family regularly collected fruits and herbs. Irula songs spoke of the rich forest that must have existed in these regions. But now, most of the land was barren, its forest cover having been removed over the years. Some wise Irula ancestor spread a rumor that there was a god living on this hill, who would get very angry if anyone cut down its trees. The sentiment worked, and so the Irulas still had their little forest to turn to for their daily needs. Lakshmi Amma and her family lived at the foot of the hill in a small, quiet Irula village. The Irulas, one of the oldest indigenous people of South India, were originally wandering tribes, moving from forest to forest. The depletion of forest cover made them settle down in these villages. For several generations, their lifestyle as hunter-gatherers, their rituals and their culture, even their decision-making, all revolved around the dictates of nature. They prayed to their goddess Kaniyamma and to the trees, because they believed that nature was their benefactor and that it was important to live in harmony with nature. And they also prayed, strangely enough, to the snake gods. Strange, because they were known to the common man as the snake catchers of South India.
அந்த நாளில் நாங்கள் காட்டுக்கு போவோம், காட்டுக்கு போய் செடிக்கு போவோம், பைப்பு எங்களுக்கு அதான் பைப்பு, பாம்பு பிடிப்போம், எலி பிடிப்போம், மொசல் பிடிப்போம். அடியில் ஒரு துண்டு கட்டிக்குவோம், மேலே ஒரு துண்டு போட்டுக்குவோம், தலை ஒரு வேஷம், துணி ஒரு வேஷம், கட்டாப்புறம் ஒன்று எடுத்து தோளில் மாட்டிக்குவோம், கையில் மாட்டிக்குவோம்.
The story goes that the Irulas ate rats as part of their diet. Snakes also preyed on rats. The Irulas were adept at catching snakes from rat holes and putting them aside to get the rats. The British colonists took advantage of this ability and, having already usurped their land, made them get the snakes too, whose skin they sold for high profits. And the Irulas came to be known as snake catchers. Obviously, the whole snake catching exercise had no meaning for the Irulas except for our benefit. The man let the snake go. The snake slithered off quickly. But before we could bat an eyelid, the little 4-year-old Irula boy ran after it and caught the huge rat snake with his bare hands. I wonder how many of us would have stood by and watched our children play around with snakes. Meanwhile, another Irula man dug into a scorpion hole just to show us. What one realized then was that these people were not really interested in the snakes and scorpions in any way. They were content to just live alongside them in symbiotic harmony. That was when the injustice of foreign rule hit one hard, when the indigenous people of our country had been systematically deprived of their land and culture and forced to exploit their own surroundings. The Irula still did hunt for rabbits, rats and other small forest creatures. Chandrama, a very communicative Irula woman, described how she had trained herself to hunt quite early in life. They had a bait made of white hen feathers, which scared the rabbits, and used a bamboo basket to trap the rabbit when it ran. The Irulas agreed to take us along with them on their hunt. When we started out that chill morning, it felt like some kind of adventure, very romantic and lots of fun. An urbanite like me knew about hunting only from books and in history perhaps. Irulas being traditional hunters, this was nothing short of a privilege. They usually went hunting along with their families. It was a long walk into almost barren land spotted with bushes. We met a man with his prize catch. Chandrama was very proud to see the success of an Irula's rabbit hunting mission. It seemed to validate her case to go hunting that morning. But I think what it really meant was about 150 rupees or so for the hunter, for rabbit meat was quite highly valued in the market. A little further down, a rat hole was identified. The Irula said that the rat was so clever that it made a dummy hole for invaders while it escaped through another route. There then ensued some kind of war of wits, with the Irulas planning to preempt the rat when it came through another part of the ground. There were, I learned, 9 varieties of rats, and the Irulas ate the forest, field, and white rats, the rats, as they were poisonous. A lot of tapping and waiting later. No rat. It was decided that the rat had found some other way out, and so we moved on. Chandrama showed me a watery frog-like creature, which he said they would eat to keep themselves from dehydrating. She also picked up a burnt tortoise shell. Obviously, somebody had had a barbecue out here earlier. Meanwhile, the Irulas found some rabbit droppings, which they gave to their little ones to eat. They said that it was very nutritious, as the rabbit was a pure vegetarian. Personally, I would prefer a vegetable sandwich. A couple of Irula women found a fruit tree, which they picked to eat on the way. One of them spotted a snakeskin, which had been shed only some time back. The Irulas laid their rabbit trap in some bushes about a kilometer away. Another elaborate process of planting iron rods on the ground at strategic places and placing the long net all around, so that one portion of the forest, quasi-forest really, was cordoned off. We were asked to move away and make the minimum noise. While some of us dozed off, Chandrama shared some of her life and views with us. She was very aware of worldly matters and not the ignorant tribal one often assumed, wrongly, of course. The little Irula child that came with us was obviously hungry. We all were hungry. I felt a pang of guilt. They were hunting that day on our request. I had not wondered what they would do if they didn't find anything to eat. The nearest village was an hour's walk away, and where would one go for even tea or coffee in this God-forsaken place? About an hour's wait later, Still no rabbit, and the Irulas came back, saying it was better they moved on. Hungry, thirsty, tired, hot, and sweating, we trudged back down the barren plain to the village. No exciting adventure this, at least not in the way I had imagined. As there had been no catch that day, we went hunting rabbits again that night. And still, no luck. But I wondered how one small rabbit or rat could satisfy the hunger of the 10 or 15 people who had come hunting that day, and who would probably, on any other day, wait for hunted food for their meal. Survival had to be, by sheer necessity, of the fittest. If rabbit hunting was so elaborate, the trouble they went through to catch a tiny rat was equally, if not more, strenuous. The Irulas never caught or killed baby or pregnant rats, as they believed that it was important for the cycle to go on. They said that the rat hoarded grain in its hole, and the Irula who found the rat took the grain back home as a bonus. But nowadays they just left the grain. Who had the patience to clean and dry it when you could buy it ready-made in the market? Progressing probably by Irula standards. Meanwhile, Sangeeta went on a little private hunting trip down the fields and came back with some crabs she had found for a brew that she would cook at home. This time the hunt was good. Watching the slushy rat struggle, and then the elan with which they broke its leg, it made our stomachs churn. But worse killings than this were being made in the name of food, which we completely ignored under the dim lights and suave interiors of five-star hotels, where the uniformed service conveniently brushed under the carpet all the brutality with which one could mass murder in the name of market saleability. The Irulas were still pardonable, for as they say in the old Tamil proverb, the sin of killing is washed away if you are killing for hunger. The law of the jungle. Will the real barbarians please stand up? If it was tough to forage for non-vegetarian meals, it looked like it was even tougher to find vegetarian food. Sangeeta showed us the secret roots which she and her husband had planted so that they could access it when there was no other food. They identified the creeper amidst the innumerable greenery, and then they dug for the roots. A couple of tiny roots which wouldn't fill a 4-year-old's stomach. The amount of trouble they went through for so little. We urbanites have been thoroughly spoiled by idlis and dosas, and thank God for pizzas, especially home deliveries. As Sangeeta carefully replaced the mud around her precious roots, the reality of her situation came through. The scene was not quite as beautiful as it looked. After generations of having been made to catch and sell snakes to the skin market, the Irulas, ever since the Indian government's Wildlife and Environment Protection Act of 1972, had a raw deal trying to make ends meet. They did not own land. They had no proper homes, no wealth, no cattle or sheep, nor even a street light for their children to study. In fact, they did not have even 3 proper meals a day. They had lost out on all that they knew as a means of living and were not equipped to fit the needs of contemporary society. In 1978, Rom Whittaker, a wildlife conservationist, came up with the idea to develop environmentally suitable livelihoods for India's disadvantaged tribal groups. He started the Crocodile Bank, a major tourist attraction in Chennai. The Irula Snake Catchers Industrial Cooperative Society was also his brainchild. The society, which started off in 1982 with 26 Irula members, was given licenses by the government to catch snakes, which were used for venom extraction. The 4 main poisonous snakes of India that were caught were the cobra, the common krait, the Russell's viper, and the saw-scaled viper. The Irulas became adept in this rather dangerous art of venom extraction. After about 4 extractions, the snakes were released back in the forests and fields. The venom was sold to the Hafkins Institute, the only place in the country where anti-venom serum was prepared. Today, the society has a turnover of 75 to 80 lakh rupees a year and 230 members, of which 126 are licensed to catch snakes, for which they are generously paid. Managed by the Irulas themselves with the help of Dravida money, the place is a huge tourist attraction, but the government has already set its paralytic fingers on its operations, and its future is becoming a question mark. We found another place where efforts are being made to lend a helping hand to the Irulas. It was a long route to the interiors of the dry and barren Chengalpet district of Tamil Nadu. We had to turn off the highway into a rickety road to reach the Irula Tribal Women's Welfare Society. Started by Zai Whittaker, this was now being managed efficiently by Krishnan, a social studies graduate who had taken a keen personal interest in the welfare of the Irulas.
இப்போ ஆதிவாசியினுடைய வாழ்க்கை என்ன பார்த்தீங்கன்னா ஆரம்ப காலத்தில் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா அவங்க எதுக்கு திரும்ப வேலை செய்வாங்கன்னா காட்டுக்கு போவாங்க. காட்டுக்கு போயிட்டு காய்கறிகள் இந்த மாதிரி கிழங்கு வேறு கீரி எடுப்பாங்க, எட்டுன்னு வருவாங்க, சாப்பிடுவாங்க, மீதி வச்சுடுவாங்க. மீதி வச்சுட்டு நேரத்தில் என்ன பண்ணுவாங்கன்னா ஓய்வு கிடைக்கும். ஓய்வு கிடைக்கிற நேரத்தில் என்ன பண்ணுவாங்கன்னா புதுசாக அவங்க விஞ்ஞானமெல்லாம் அப்போ தான் வளரும். இந்த மாதிரி கலைகள் கண்டுபிடிப்பாங்க, ஆடல் பாடல் கண்டுபிடிப்பாங்க, சமூக ஒற்றுமை பற்றி பேசுவாங்க.
Nobody knew who wrote their songs, when they were written, or who composed their tunes. Their mind was their library, and their skills were handed down by word of mouth through the generations. Their pure diet gave them a strong body constitution. The older Irulas hardly had any grey hair, and they could climb trees even at 90 years of age. Their true wealth was, however, their knowledge of medicinal herbs to cure poisonous bites of snakes and scorpions and illnesses of men, women and children. What was to us merely insignificant looking little plants were the Irula's secret magic of health. Lakshmi Amma and Sangeeta showed us various medicinal herbs.
வேதியாகும் வாந்தி வரும் அதுக்கெல்லாம் நல்லா குணமாகும் தெரிஞ்சுங்க அது வந்து வெள்ளை போகிறது இல்லை அது குழந்தைங்களுக்கு பால் இல்லாதவங்களுக்கு அந்த அம்மா மச்சி வச்சு கொடுத்தோம்னா காலையில் இது வந்து பெரிய தும்பை இது என்ன பண்ண குழந்தைங்களுக்கெல்லாம் பெரியவங்களுக்கெல்லாம் தொண்டைக்கு வெல்லம் போட்டு கொதிக்க வச்சு தேன் விட்டு.
Lakshmi Amma was an Irula medicine woman. Carrying her bag that she would not keep down even for a moment, she walked down the lakeside, explaining the different uses of the herbs.
இது வந்து இது வேப்பிலை பல வந்து வேப்பிலை இது ரெண்டையும் போட்டு சாணி எடுத்துன்னு வந்து நல்லா அரைச்சிட்டு போட்டு பவுடர் ஆக்கி இடித்து உண்டை உண்டையாக பிடிச்சி வச்சிட்டோம்னா நல்லது. இந்த கீரை சாப்பிட்டோம்னா இதை பாருங்க ஒரு கொத்து இது கொத்து இது மூலத்துக்கெல்லாம் நல்லா இது மெதக்கீரைன்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. குழந்தை வச்சுக்கிறீங்க சாப்பிட்டா கூட ஜீரணமாகும் நல்லா. அப்போ நன்னாளி வேறு இதெல்லாம் வச்சு எலுமிச்சம் தழை திருவாச்சி தழை இதெல்லாம் வச்சு நல்லா அரைச்சி சட்னி நல்லா இருக்கும். நீங்கள் அது அப்படியே சாப்பிடலாமா? இது வந்து இது பேர் புளியவரண செடியை. இது வந்து இந்த பாம்பு கடிச்சிட்டு மருந்து கொடுத்தோன்னா இதோட கிழங்கு பெருசாக தடியாக இருக்கும். அந்த வேறாண்ட தோண்டி எடுத்துன்னு போய் சிறுசாக கட் பண்ணி
நீ சாப்பிட்டு காட்டினா தான் உங்களுக்கு தெரியும்.
இங்கே பாரு என்ன பண்ணு புளியாலம் இருக்குதா அப்படின்னு வாயில் போட்டு வந்து இன்ட்ரோல் கல் வளருது இல்லை அதுக்கு வச்சு அரைச்சி கொடுத்து.
Sangeeta's 4-year-old was quite a perky little fellow. He picked up a crab from the lakeside to show the camera.
மாசமாக இருக்க சொல்லி நாங்கள் மருந்து கொடுப்போம். வயிற்றுல சொல்லி கழுத்தில் மருந்து கொடுப்போம். அது பிறந்த உடனே எதுவுமே எல்லாம் நாங்கள் சாப்பிடுவோம். வயிற்றுல சொல்லி நாங்கள் நல்லா சாப்பிடுவோம். அந்த குழந்தை பிறந்த பிறகு அதுக்கும் கொடுப்போம். நாங்களும் நல்லா சாப்பிடுவோம். அதான் நாங்கள் மூலிகையிலே தான் நாங்கள் இருக்கிறோமே. எழுந்தாரம் தான் எங்களுக்கு மூலிகை ஆச்சு.
Lakshmi Amma agreed to open her precious bag, and it was a veritable treasure trove of vague-looking roots and powders and leaves. All medicinal herbs, kept in readiness for any emergency. Sangeeta's rash little 4-year-old had hurt himself, and he preempted Lakshmi Amma in carrying out the treatment. Apparently, he knew exactly what to do and how. Lakshmi Amma had special secret herbs to treat humans and animals too. She wouldn't tell which ones though.
ஒரு பாம்பு கிம்பு அது சுட்ட பாம்பு கட்டு பாம்பு ஒரு நல்ல பாம்பு கஷ்டம்னா அந்த நேரத்துக்கு வந்து பெரிய
பாம்பு
இதுக்கெல்லாம் சில நேரத்துக்குலாம் வீட்டில் வைத்தியம் பண்ணிவிடுவோம். பெரிய பெரிய இந்த கருவெலாம் நல்ல பாம்பு கஷ்டம் என்ன பண்ணுவோம், ஒரு வேளை மருந்து தான் வீட்டில் கொடுப்போம். மறுவேளை மருந்து நீ ஆஸ்பத்திரி போய் பயன்படுத்திக்கன்னு சொல்லுவோம்.
When Lakshmi Amma treated a person for snake bite, she could just feel the man's pulse and say which snake had bitten him. Then she would delve right away into her bag and pick up her secret herbal remedies and give him strange-looking leaves and powders. One wondered what she gave for him to smoke. But none of them, least of all Lakshmi Amma, would say what it was, just some herbs.
இன்றைக்கி இருக்கிற உலகத்துக்கு பாரம்பரியமாக நம்ம வாழ முடியாது, காட்டில் வாழ முடியாது. ஏன்னா வனச்சட்டங்கள் வந்து பல்வேறு இதெல்லாம் தெரியும் உங்களுக்கு. அதே மாதிரி பாரம்பரியமாக வேட்டையாடுதுன்னா அது மாதிரி இன்றைக்கெல்லாம் வேட்டையாட முடியாது. சரி, எப்படி நம்ம வாழ்க்கைக்கு வந்துட்டு நம்மளுடைய திறமையை பயன்படுத்துறது அப்படின்றதுக்கு தான் நாங்கள் என்ன பண்ணுங்கன்னா, அங்கே ஒரு மூலிகை மருந்து உற்பத்தி மற்றும் மூலிகை மருந்து சேகரிப்பு மற்றும் உற்பத்தி செஞ்சு அதை விற்கின்ற ஒரு திட்டமாக நாங்கள் இங்கே தண்டனை மையமாக வச்சு செய்கிறோங்க.
எங்கள் சார் என்ன பண்ணார் வந்து, நம்ம இருள பெண்களும் ஒன்றா சேர்ந்து நம்ம ஒரு நெசட் வைக்கலாம், நம்ம வந்து ஒரு மரம் வளர்ப்பு செய்யலாம் சொல்லி எங்கள் சார் சொன்னார். நாங்கள்லாம் கும்பலாக சேர்ந்து ஒரு 20-30 பெண்கள்லாம் வந்து பார்க்க சொல்லி, இது வெறும் மைதானமே தான். இது இந்த மைதானத்தில் வந்து நாங்கள்லாம் போய் காட்டை போய் விதை பொறிக்கணும் வந்து இந்த விதையெல்லாம் எல்லாம் சேகரித்து பாக்கெட் வாங்கிட்டு வந்து போட்டு தண்ணி மொண்டு ஊற்றி இடுப்பில் தண்ணி மொண்டு ஊற்றுவோம். தண்ணி மொண்டு ஊற்றி பாக்கெட்டில் மருந்து விதை போட்டு அப்படியே பாய்ச்சி அப்படியே இடத்துல வந்து நாங்கள் தண்ணிக்குன்னு எதுவுமே இல்லாத இருந்தது. இந்த இடத்துல நாங்கள் வந்து நின்று பேர் தான் இந்த மரம்லாம் இந்த கண்ணெல்லாம் போட்டு வளர்த்துன பேர் இந்த இடத்துல நாங்கள் தண்ணியாக உற்பத்தி ஆகி.
What had been barren land was now a thick forest, rich in its biodiversity. filled with a variety of trees and plants and medicinal herbs, all thanks to the knowledge and efforts of the Irulas and under the keen guidance of Krishnan. The Irula ladies in the neighboring villages collected flowers and leaves and seeds from this forest and others in the area. They took only what they needed and were always careful to leave a few flowers back on each plant. They then brought these collections to the herbarium at ITWWS, where it was weighed and recorded by Irula women themselves, and the women were paid accordingly. The collections were cut, cleaned, and laid out to dry in the sun. They were then powdered and packed into bags and boxes according to their uses and medicinal properties, and later sold to the public. The ITWWS had developed an impressive seed bank, which Krishnan hoped would help replenish the environment. There was a nursery, also created and maintained by the Irula women. They gave free saplings to neighboring villages and sold many to those who wanted them. They grew medicinal herbs, benefiting many villagers. The women who worked here were given a decent remuneration. Lakshmi Amma was quite involved in all this work. She was, in fact, a point of reference for many, including forest officials, who would take her advice for various herbal solutions to their health problems.
இவங்ககிட்ட ஒரு 300 வகையான மூலிகை மருந்து செடிகள் வந்துட்டு இவங்க வைத்தியத்துக்கு பயன்படுத்திருக்காங்க. ஆனால் 300 வகையான மூலிகை செடிகளை எங்களால் மிஞ்சி போனால் 150 தான் எங்களால் அங்கே சேகரிக்க முடியுது. மீதெல்லாம் இல்லை. இது மாதிரி ஒன்று இருந்துச்சுன்றாங்க, அது எங்கேனாக்க கிடைக்க மாட்டேங்குது. ஸோ இதுவே நம்ம இது லேட்டு நாங்கள் பண்ணுறதே. இதுவே நம்ம இன்னொரு 10-15 வருஷத்துக்கு அப்புறம் போனாங்களா, அந்த முதியோர்கள் இருக்காங்க பார்த்தியா, அந்த முதியோர்கள் இருக்கிற ஜெனரேஷன் போயிடுச்சுன்னு வச்சுங்களேன், அந்த திறமையெல்லாம் போயிடும்.
This was where a person like Lakshmi was valuable. It was important that her fund of knowledge and her experience in treating with medicinal herbs was passed on to posterity. We were quite amazed when we saw the calm and sure manner in which she treated one of the Irula men who had just been in a road accident. But the younger Irula women had other problems to deal with. They were socially ostracized, treated worse than other women, paid very poor labor wages, and there were records of sexual atrocities committed against them. They were even ashamed to call themselves Irulas. The ITWWS became a center for the Irula women to discuss their problems and try to arrive at common solutions. The women proved to be quite articulate, more so than men really. They also used their traditional tribal songs to propagate messages of awareness, writing new lyrics that encouraged them to get their legal rights from the government, such as their community certificate, their land documents for ownership of property, and not to bow down to mistreatment in the name of caste and creed. To increase the awareness among the Irula women regarding their situation and to help them rise above it, Krishnan published many articles about the Irulas in magazines on environment and women. As we sat around the bonfire that night, it was obvious that the Irulas here were getting more and more integrated into the ways of the present world. This was evident in their easy interactions with us, visitors from the concrete jungle.
இப்போ ஊர் நாகரிகம் எப்படி ஆச்சோ அது போல் இப்போ நாங்கள் வந்து நாகரிகமாகி போயிட்டுருக்குறோம். எல்லாம் தோசை சுடுவோம், இட்லி சுடுவோம், அதை சுடுவோம், வடை சுடுவோம், எல்லாம் பலகாரம் அவங்க எப்படி செய்கிறாங்களோ அது போல் இப்போ நாகரிகம் எங்களுக்கு. அதுக்கு முன்னே இந்த நாகரிகம் இப்போ கிடையாது. இப்போ நல்ல நாகரிகம்.
Many Irulas were now working as agricultural laborers and in brickmaking. Their children went to local schools, balwadis, to study. None of the little ones had any idea what the traditional Irula songs and dances were like. Cinema was obviously a major influence on their growth, as we saw in the dance they did for us one night. Even their parents encouraged them to emulate the heroes and heroines of the silver screen. Krishnan had collected a few musical instruments of the Irulas, which were quite out of use these days, but which he hoped would at least be research material for those interested in studying the tribe. Dr. Tyagarajan, ex-chairman of the Bank of Madura, greatly interested in the indigenous people of the country, conducted an experiment with some Irulas when he gave them paints and told them to make their own pictures, hoping to kindle and recall old tribal memories. And these are the results of his experiment. However, very few of the Irulas were able to come up with anything, and even they are now dead and gone. Today, quite a few of their houses are cement structures that the Indian government has built for them, but this is not really the need of the hour. It is more vital that the medicinal herbs, still freely available in the environment, are recognized for their true value and given the importance that is now being given only to allopathy. What Krishnan and the ITWWS had done for the Irulas and the environment was indeed a good strategy, but it was crucially important that the concept was taken to and accepted by Irulas in other regions as well. As we walked that night in the quiet stillness of the ITWWS forests, we wondered how far this effort was really useful to the Irulas, let alone the environment. We were ourselves so addicted to aeroplanes and air conditioners, were we also not party to the environmental degradation that had uprooted indigenous people like the Irulas? What kind of effort would it take to replenish the damage that had been done, and was still being done, to so many other environments and people?
நாங்கள் எப்படி இதை வந்து கொண்டு போகிறோங்கன்னா, பஞ்சாயத்துக்கு சொந்தமாக நிறைய நிலங்க இருக்குது. அந்த நிலங்கள் வந்து வேஸ்ட் லேண்டாகவே இருக்குது. அதில் ஒரு செடியும் இல்லை, ஒன்றும் இல்லை, சத்தையும் இல்லை, அது மாதிரி ஒன்றுத்துக்கு உதவாத இடமா இருக்குது. அந்த இடமெல்லாம் இந்த மாதிரி எங்கள் கிராமத்துக்கு அங்கங்கே இருக்கிற சங்கத்தின் கையில் இந்த இடங்களை வந்து நீங்கள் அவங்கக்கிட்ட கொடுங்க. அந்த இடத்துல மூலிகை வளர்த்து ஒரு 20% வந்து பஞ்சாயத்துக்கும் 80% இவங்களுக்கு வருவாய்க்காகவும் அதை பயன்படுத்திக்கலாங்க. ரெண்டாவது மக்களுடைய தேவையை நம்ம பூர்த்தி பண்ண முடியும் அப்படின்ற மாதிரி அப்ரோச் பண்ணிட்டு வரங்க. நிறைய இடங்கள் அது மாதிரி இடமும் அலாட் பண்ணியிருக்கிறாங்க. ஒரு சில இடங்களில் வந்துட்டு எங்கள் மக்களும் வந்துட்டு அரசாங்கத்துக்கிட்ட இடமும் கேட்டுக்கிறாங்க தனித்தனியாக.
Another effort in bringing the work of the ITWWS to the outside world was to expose the Irula women and their knowledge and talents in various public forums. We found them practicing for a dance to be performed in front of a gathering of Irulas. While they did dance their traditional dances, they also had modern songs and movements and were open to trying out new ideas. On the beaches of the shore temple of Mahabalipuram, it was a grand gala getting together of tourists and Irulas alike. This was a once-a-year affair in the month of March, where Irulas from all over the state and outside gathered at this one spot. They came in droves, babes in arms and cooking utensils to boot. Their little makeshift partitions with saris were quite innovative and served the purpose of overnight shelters to sleep. What a change of mentality from their supposed attitude of not claiming any land as private property and of a community living kind of lifestyle. But not all the Irulas were now snake catchers, nor did they all have knowledge of medicinal herbs. The place was a veritable mela, a fun fair with entertainment galore. The story goes that the Irulas, in their wandering days, were very soft-natured and always moved away whenever a more aggressive tribal group came to occupy their space. Came a time when they had reached the shores of Mahabalipuram, and then there was nowhere to move, for only the ocean waters lay in front of them. That was when they suddenly found the courage to turn and face their usurpers. So these shores were considered sacred to their tribe, and they came here every year on a full moon night to offer their prayers. The Irulas had by now updated their tastes in entertainment. While some of them rested from their long journey, more enterprising Irulas made a little income during the course of the day. As the evening drew close, some of the Irula men decided to take entertainment into their own hands, after having obviously made themselves tipsy with drink. Krishnan had put up a tent that exhibited the ITWWS herbal products. A lot of tourists and foreigners, visitors to the Mela, came to look at the products. Irula representatives, including our very own Chandrama, occupied the stage and made very impressive speeches about the Irulas, their needs and their achievements. By late evening, the crowd was overwhelming, for Irulas had been constantly coming in all the time. While many of them sang Irula songs on the mic, Irula youngsters picked up the beat to move to their own modern brand of dance. All quietened down for the night when they slept. But suddenly, just after midnight, their religious festivities began amidst loud drums and chanting. They prayed to their gods, with some of them getting possessed by spirits. Irula marriages were conducted, and some children had their heads tonsured. And the more so-called modern Irulas once again had their own ways of celebration. There were some special rituals, and then they went to bathe in the sea waters. It was quite a sight that morning on the shores of the Mahabalipuram beach. As one saw their strange rituals and their rather crass-looking behavior and seemingly unhygienic habits that went along with it, it was hard to decide whether to call them nature's own people or to call them backward, or to blame ourselves for making them the scapegoats in the process of what the world called development. Back in the Irula village, as I watched my very city-bred son play with the Irula children, I wondered what lay in their future. Were they also aspiring to become the English-speaking urban products who had quite lost their connection to their rural roots? Or was it going to be worthwhile for them to try and retain their tribal identity? And at what cost? Or was it possible to at least try and preserve their invaluable treasure trove of knowledge for posterity? And while we armchair philosophers mulled over these theories, Lakshmi Amma was busy tending her little garden of medicinal herbs. A garden she had carefully developed to beat the environmental depletion that was continually happening all around. She and her family gathered their everyday collection of herbal leaves to take to the Irula Women's Center as usual. There was a lot of work to be done. She had to identify and preserve different species of plants for reference by school and college students who came there more often nowadays to study botany, nature, and the environment. She would relax only after her day's duty was over. The Irula Tribal Women's Welfare Society was now her home, and she had her life's purpose cut out for her. Was the effort that was being taken to preserve the knowledge and wisdom of people like her sufficient? Or was it going to disappear with her? Would her tribe increase? Was there hope for her people to survive intact through the process of development? Or perhaps one must take a leaf from her book and get on with the work of giving back to the soil what we so ruthlessly took from it, and trust that just as nature's creations find their way to the light, so will the Irulas discover their own special way out of their darkness.